That is because this Falcon 9 vehicle is autonomous.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
And great news, Falcon 9 is now in startup. We are now just waiting for the launch director's final call.
SpaceX launch director, go for launch.
And excellent news, all systems are go for launch of Falcon 9 with the OneWeb Launch 16 mission payload.
T-minus 30 seconds. Seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engines full power, and liftoff of Falcon 9. Go Falcon, go OneWeb 2.
Pitching downrange.
Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Pad 40 at Cape Canaveral, carrying the OneWeb Launch 16 mission payload. Now, during ascent, we tilt the engines, which is what we call gimbaling.
Power and telemetry.
That turns the rocket horizontally, which is what we call a gravity turn. And we're still going up, but we are now also heading horizontally away from the launch pad.
Vehicle supersonic.
Moments ago, we did throttle down the engines on the first stage in preparation for Max Q, which is coming up here in a few seconds.
Max Q.
Great news, we have just passed through the largest structural load that the vehicle sees on ascent. Really awesome views here of the first stage vehicle. Now, the rocket typically needs to go 17,500 miles per hour horizontally in order to avoid being pulled back down to Earth and to get into orbit. So you can keep an eye out on the stage 1 telemetry, and that's on the bottom left hand of your screen. Again, incredible views of the first stage vehicle, first stage engines lighting up there. We do have 5 events coming up here back to back. That will be MECO, main engine cutoff, stage separation, stage 1 flip, SES-1, the boost back burn on the first stage, and then we will also have the fairing halves deploy. Again, that is a few events happening in quick succession: MECO, stage separation, stage 1 flip, SES-1, boost back burn, and fairing deploy.
And MECO.
Stage separation confirmed.
And back ignition. Stage 1, boost back startup.
There, we have just seen all of those events, really cool views. We had MECO, stage separation, stage 1 flip, which you can kind of see in the background of the second stage vehicle's view. Awesome view here of the first stage in its boost back burn right now. We also had second stage engine startup 1, which is that MVAC engine lighting up on the right-hand screen. Now next up will be the conclusion of the first stage boost back burn, and then shortly after followed by the fairing deploy.
Stage 1, boost back shutdown.
And there you can see on your left-hand screen as those engines shut down on the first stage. That concludes the boost back burn for the first stage vehicle.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And also got an awesome view of fairing deploy there on your screen. Now those fairing halves,
Both vehicles are following nominal trajectories.
one flew for a 6th time and the other for a 7th time, and we will be attempting to retrieve these fairing halves again today once they fall back down to Earth using our recovery vessel Doug today. Now we are T plus 4 minutes and about 15 seconds into today's mission, and we are in the first of 2 planned MVAC burns before satellite deployment. Now on your screen on the left-hand side is a view from the first stage. It is a little bit dark there, but when we do come up on the entry burn, which is at T plus 6 minutes and 20 seconds, you should see those 3 engines reignite on your screen. And that entry burn is where we reignite these 3 engines, and that helps slow the vehicle down as it passes back into the Earth's atmosphere. Now we need to slow the vehicle down to reduce re-entry forces, which helps us recover and reuse the first stage vehicle. Now, during the entry burn, Falcon 9 is decelerating by firing its Merlin engines. We're also still moving rapidly, so this causes the vehicle to fly through its Merlin exhaust gases, which is also what we refer to as the rocket's plume. And this deposits a layer of soot on the vehicle surface. Now, that soot comes from the carbon-based fuel that Falcon 9 uses. And we are just about 30 seconds away from that entry burn beginning on the first stage. On your right-hand screen is a view from the second stage, looking at that MVAC engine glowing very bright there. Now, stage 1 is making its way back to land, and you can see Cape Canaveral there in the background of your left-hand screen just a little bit. It will perform 3 burns for landing. It already completed the boost back burn, now coming up on the entry burn, followed by the landing burn.
Stage 1, entry burn startup.
Great news, as you heard that call out and can see on your screen, we have reignited 3 of the 9 M1D engines on the first stage. That's the center E9 engine, followed by the E1 and E5 engines.
Stage 1, entry burn shut down.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
It's less than a 20-second burn, and as you can see, the engines have shut down. That concludes the entry burn for the first stage
Both
vehicle.
vehicles continue to follow nominal trajectories.
Now we are just about 30 seconds away from the landing burn beginning on the first stage vehicle. It is just the E9 engine that will ignite for landing, and the M1D engines have about 190,000 pounds of thrust, so 1 engine reigniting is just enough to help slow the vehicle down in time to touch down for landing.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
Stage 1 landing burn.
There you can see the landing burn has begun on Falcon 9. Let's watch as the first stage touches down on landing zone 1.
Landing leg deployed.
Stage 1 landing confirmed.
Wow, an awesome view of our land landing. As you just saw, Falcon 9 has touched down on landing zone 1. That marks SpaceX's 162nd recovery of an orbital class rocket.
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance.
And that includes first stage landings for both Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. Now coming up shortly here, we will have SECO 1, that is second stage engine cutoff 1. That is where we will shut down this MVAC engine and allow the vehicle to coast with the payload before its second burn. And that's coming up here in just a few seconds.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And great news, we have had SECO-1 as well as that call out confirming a good orbit. Now the mission isn't over just yet. The second stage is now embarking on its first coast phase. After the coast phase, we will light that MVAC engine for a second time around T plus 55 minutes.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And great news, we did have confirmation of a good orbit. That means that we did have SES-2 and SECO-2. The OneWeb Launch 16 mission payload is now still attached to Falcon 9's second stage. Now coming up next, we do have 3 separate deployments of all 40 satellites. Now the first set of satellite deployments is scheduled to occur in just a couple minutes from now. After the first block of satellites are deployed, the second and third deploy sequences will likely begin in a blackout period. Now, once we regain connection to our second stage, we'll come back live to confirm successful deployments of the satellites that deployed during the blackout period and cover the rest of the deployments left in each sequence. Now, luckily, we should have coverage of the entire first deployment sequence, which will deploy 14 satellites. Now, deployment should start here in just a little over a minute and a half from now. But if you're just now joining us, welcome to our webcast for the OneWeb Launch 16 mission. So far, we've had a nominal mission with liftoff at 11:50 p.m. Eastern Time from Space Launch Complex 40 in Florida. We also had a successful recovery of the first stage for the second time for this booster. Stage 2 has now completed its 2 burns for this mission. And again, we are just about a minute away from the first payload deployment sequence. Again, that is the first of 3 sequences for deploying the payloads on this mission. Now, today's mission will mark OneWeb's 16th overall launch and bring their LEO constellation to over 80% completion with 542 satellites in space. Now, we are just a few seconds away from the first set of satellites beginning to deploy from the second stage, so let's listen into the nets and keep our eyes on the live screen there.
OneWeb, Sat Alpha 1 and Alpha 5, separation confirmed.
And good callouts there. We've had the first 2 satellites deploy.
OneWeb, Sat Alpha 4 and Alpha 8, separation confirmed.
And there we've had the second set of satellites deploy. That confirms 4 of the 14 in this first deployment sequence. We're currently in
OneWeb, Sat Bravo 1 and Bravo 5, separation confirmed.
And great call out there, and you can actually see the satellites deploying, drifting away from second stage there. That confirms 6 of the 14 have deployed.
OneWeb, Sat Charlie 1 and Charlie 5, separation confirmed.
And another couple have been confirmed as well. That is 8 of the 14 in this deployment sequence.
Expected loss of signal, Diego Garcia.
OneWeb, Sat Alpha 2 and Alpha 6, separation confirmed.
And a really cool view of that one right there. We did see a satellite drifting away from second stage with callouts on the nets of the confirmation of deployment. We're roughly 30 seconds away from the next set of satellites that will be deployed in this deployment sequence.
OneWeb, Sat Bravo 4 and Bravo 8, separation confirmed.
Great news, and we did see in the top left-hand corner of the screen, another set of satellites have been deployed from the Falcon 9 second stage. And that confirms 12 of the 14 satellites in this deployment sequence. So we are just waiting for a couple more, which should be deploying here shortly.
OneWeb, Sat Alpha 3 and Alpha 7, separation confirmed.
And great call out there. And we also were able to see the last two satellites in this deployment sequence drift away from Falcon 9. So with confirmation of successful deployment of the first 14 OneWeb satellites from the second stage, we are heading into a coast phase that contains a blackout period. With confirmation of 5 payload deploys, as well as regained ground station coverage, as you can see live there, satellites drifting away from Falcon 9's second stage.
OneWeb, sat Charlie 3 and Charlie 7, separation confirmed.
That additional 2 satellites confirms 7 in this deployment sequence.
OneWeb, sat Delta 4 and Delta 8, separation confirmed.
And there you can see another set drifting away from the second stage. There is a total of 13 in this deployment sequence, and we do have 4 satellites left.
OneWeb, sat Delta 3 and Delta 7, separation confirmed.
Great live views there as you watch the satellites drift away from Falcon 9. That confirms another 2, and we just have 2 more for this deployment sequence.
OneWeb, sat Charlie 2 and Charlie 6, separation confirmed.
And as you heard and can visually see on your screen, we've had the last 2 satellites deploy in this deployment sequence, and that confirms successful deployment of all 13 satellites in the second deployment sequence. Now, so far, we've deployed 27 of 40 total satellites in today's mission. Our third and final payload deployment sequence should begin around the T+1 hour and 29-minute mark, but we likely won't have ground station coverage until 3 minutes after the third deployment sequence begins. Ground station
OneWeb,
coverage.
sat Echo 8, separation confirmed.
Great news. There you can see on your screen
OneWeb, sat Echo 4, separation confirmed.
several satellites drifting away from Falcon 9.
Acquisition of signal of Vandenberg.
And there's that call out that we did regain ground station coverage. And we have deployed 34 satellites so far out of the 40 for today's mission.
OneWeb, sat Delta 2 and Delta 6, separation confirmed.
And again, as you can see on your screen, as well as hearing that call out, another 2 satellites have deployed from Falcon 9's second stage. That is 36 total out of the 40. We have 4 more satellites left to deploy.
Acquisition of signal South Texas.
Now, if you're just now joining us, you are watching the OneWeb Launch 16 mission. And we are currently in the third deployment sequence out of 3. This is the final deployment sequence for the 40 satellites. So far, we have deployed 36 of the 40. We have 4 more left.
OneWeb, sat Echo 2 and Echo 6, separation confirmed.
Make that 2 more left with these 2 drifting away from the second stage.
OneWeb, Sat Echo 1 and Echo 5 separation confirmed. All 40 OneWeb satellite separations confirmed.
With a live view out in space, you can see the last 2 satellites drifting away from Falcon 9's second stage. And as you heard, that does confirm successful deployment of all 40 OneWeb satellites. Now, all of us here at SpaceX want to give a big thank you to our customer, OneWeb, for entrusting us with today's mission. We also want to give a shout out to the Range and Federal Aviation Administration for supporting today's mission. Tonight's launch concludes our 201st overall SpaceX mission to date and second launch of the year.